Good afternoon. I have a few questions for the Democratic candidate for president. How can you continue to blame the mechanism and the ownership of firearms against the entire population of the United States as one? Your argument has been to make it harder and harder and harder and harder to own firearms, while trying to make it only that law enforcement ends up with the ability to own a firearm, possess a firearm, carry a firearm. Now you've had your argument towards mental health, and then this bulk bundling of different death tolls and death rates through different polls that you've taken and lump them all into one place, and then accused everyone who has done their best so far to abide by the law when carrying a firearm, possessing a firearm, utilizing a firearm as a tool. And it is becoming grossly evident that you do not respect those people's rights. You do not want to honor the Constitution of the United States, or even believe that the largest majority of the citizenry is capable of defending themselves, owning and possessing a firearm, and doing what's right. Hunting, self-defense, protection involve a firearm as a tool. Oh, you want to blame the big black rifle. You want to blame the semi-automatic firearm. You want to blame the bullet. Let's make it harder and harder and harder and harder and break everything down to its minutia so that you can try and regulate it, stamp it, and tax it, and therefore capitalize from it. A lot of people do not realize that the institution of government was never meant to make its own profit. Most people forget that the idea of a congressman, a senator, a representative, and an officer of the government was originally mandated as a civic duty to which they would have to return to civilization. Tell me how that makes sense. Let's get back to the guns for a second. Women and men and everything else in between has, inside the borders of the United States and in the recognized states of North America, considered part of the United States of America, has the constitutional ability to protect itself, to protect themselves, and to protect others. Whether there's an interaction with law enforcement or not, it's based in the Constitution, and before that, it's an innate instinct to defend yourself and protect yourself. I hope out there, if someone that doesn't agree with me would be willing to have an open dialogue, a conversation, and I'm sure that it's going to go to feeling someone on that side of that argument more often than not, is going to put feeling before fact. It's that simple. If you had a choice, I am almost 100% positive. Let's give an example. If you built a box with high walls and no windows, and you put an animal, a large animal, let's say a bear or lion, on one side. And for this example, we're going to say a mother with 2 children in that same box in the middle of nowhere. And after about a day, there may be some peace initially, but after a day or two, survival is going to come into play. And that mom, whether she agrees with being in possession of or using a firearm to protect or defend herself or her family, no one being able to come and help. No one. No cops, no neighbors, no other family members. It's mom, her gun, and her 2 kids and some clothing. There's no weather to be concerned about. There's access to water for both of them. But it's going to come down to it. That animal's going to get hungry. And it's going to come after that person. And that mom, those motherly instincts are going to kick in. Let's change this up on the curve a little bit, though, for you. Let's call that a bear. And let's give her 1 cub. That entire situation escalates in a heartbeat. We know what's going to happen. An intelligent individual knows what's going to happen. Whether they agree with it or not, we know what's going to happen. Once that mother, that human mother, realizes that that bear mother, a sow by the way, it's going to come down to that animal's instincts against that human's instincts. And the second that that human realizes what it has to do, that's where morality comes into play. And morality is the distinction between the criminal mind. That's one of the greatest components of it, without a doubt. And I'd love to argue that one because it's near inarguable. But that human is going to shoot that bear and attempt to kill it before it can kill her or her children. That is just the way it is. In real life, that situation doesn't play out. You have groups out there. Let's give, for an example, the Moms Demand Action. That's an interesting bubble that they live in. When just about anybody examines it from the outside, whether you're a gun owner or not, the mentality to remove the ability to protect someone or yourself doesn't take into account millions upon millions upon millions of other factors in millions upon millions of other situations. It's one person as part of a group of people wishing to impose their opinions on another in the presence of an existing right, and, well, a legally dictated one at that. I don't think that, my personal belief, I think, is pretty clear. I think that but I'm going to clarify it a little bit more. I think everybody should know how to safely and appropriately maintain and know how to use a firearm. Whether they choose to own one, whether they choose to carry one, doesn't need to happen. Doesn't even come into the argument. If you're inside the borders of the United States or anywhere else in the world, if you feel comfortable carrying a firearm, which, if that's not your normal practice, just so you know, no one is ever completely comfortable carrying a firearm. If they are observing all the rules of safety and their environment, no one is ever entirely comfortable. Does that mean that they won't carry a firearm? No. Does that mean that they will overreact to a situation? No. Does it mean that that individual that carries one daily is going to go out and hurt someone or themselves? No, it does not. But it is an argument that causes discomfort. It is a topic that needs to have an honest and objective review. You can tell I don't necessarily look at the camera at all times and engage, but there are so many different situations, and I still have difficulty grasping why anyone inside the borders of the United States has any kind of objection with someone carrying a firearm. You know, there have been many ideas passed around humanity, passed around the U.S. regarding the topic of firearms. Everybody tries to ping back to, the wild, wild west. Well, what was it during that time? A firearm was the representative idea of civility. It, on one hand, it was the great leveling field, where someone of small stature was equal to someone of large physical stature, and both possessed a firearm. They both had an equal opportunity to have a conversation before violence occurred. It didn't necessarily, that violence didn't necessarily have to include that firearm. But it leveled the playing field for physical proportioning, strength, endurance, stuff like that. It's a tool. It has no mind of its own. It is a tool. It doesn't matter what color it is. It doesn't really matter what features they have. It is a tool. What is responsible? What makes that such a bad thing? It is the person utilizing that tool. And then you jump down the argument of mental health. Oh, well, this person and that person and this person for this reason and that reason and this reason. And, oh, let's go ahead and gather up as many. Let's locate that reason, then expound upon it, then try and shove as many people into that group, and let's brand them. Lifelong, eternal, let's brand them. That seems to be the mentality of the anti-gun crowd. It's discouraging and it's despicable. I'm not a criminal. I've purchased my firearms. I've had my background check run. I've been in tens of thousands of homes of civilians in the United States as part of my job. There have been many times where I'm carrying my firearm. Many times where I have been in the not so greatest of places, all the way up to the wealthiest of homes, homes of millionaires and billionaires, doing my job. I've carried my firearm in those the same as I have in the cheapest rundown shack, filled with hoarders. You never know where something is going to come from. If you need reassurance to be able to guarantee your personal safety, it's very, very simple to do. Look at the average response times for law enforcement in your area. And then remember two things. One, cops aren't normally called until after the incident occurs. And two, well, it's been recently established and spoken about that police and law enforcement don't necessarily have an obligation to protect you. That's also the purpose of a TRO and these red flag bills, is they assume a minority report, which means that something is guaranteed to happen beforehand, so they take the initiative measure. Whether it is legitimate or lawful, they take that measure. And more often than not, it bypasses our court system. It bypasses Fourth Amendment. It bypasses First Amendment, Second Amendment, and Fifth Amendment. I guess the rest of my message should conclude like this. If you're afraid of guns, find an authorized shooting range and ask for instruction and face that form of fear. Locate a local shooting group and initiate a conversation. Don't be afraid. People that are in shooting groups in public places have some really good stories, some very good experiences, and are very welcoming, and would love to have a conversation that helps embed to you the safety and the security of being a first-time shooter. Going through that process, what it's actually like. I would invite people. I invite women. I invite families. I invite individuals that have never shot. People that may or may not have a fear. There's a process. It's a conversation to start. And if you're afraid to talk to people, you're going to live in fear. We are socializing creatures as human beings. There is no reason for you not to say hello. Get on a blog, get on a social media site. Hey, I'd like to know more. I don't want to go through the big giant groups. I want to stay local in my area. I could almost guarantee you could pick up a baseball in almost any Midwest neighborhood and throw it as hard as you can, as far as you can. And you more than likely will hit someone that owns a firearm. And if you don't know that they're there, and you went to actually communicate with them, they would probably engage. Hey, yes, you just ask them that question. Hey, I don't know anything about firearms. Is there anything that you could tell me? Sure. Got a few minutes? Or, hey, I don't really have time right now, but I would like to discuss it. I keep it pretty simple myself. I try and keep a very casual environment, lean into it slow, have the discussion before having a firearm in someone's hands, walking through the steps, walking through the steps, starting with safety, and having that conversation about the equipment, the tool, the firearm, and engage that way, and do so slowly. If it just depends on the person that you're engaging with. You want to, that is the best way to have a conversation about guns. If someone does approach you or you approach them, is start slow. You don't jump to the end of the spectrum. You don't. Sure, you're going to have a few people out there going, man, I've never shot a gun. I want to go out and get a 50. And I want to go lay down a few rounds. That's $6 a round for you to just get a feel good. There's time and there's prep. It's expensive already. It shouldn't be as expensive as it is, but it is. If you're that person to go initiate that conversation, do yourself a favor. Bring a few bucks. That person, that law-abiding citizen that has built a good piece of equipment, that has that experience, knows the majority price of their ammunition, throw them a few bucks. And they will make sure, I can almost guarantee, 99 out of 100, guarantee that they're going to make sure that you are safe, unharmed, are familiar and comfortable, but at the same time, willing to engage. Whether you end up at the range or not, that conversation is where you start. All right. Well, this has been my daily adventure and rant. But anybody that like to engage in a conversation, well, we could start it here in the comments and go from there. Other than that, I hope you all have a good day. Can engage in a polite and articulate discussion regarding firearms. Do yourself a favor. There's a lot of negative information out there regarding firearms that's intentionally designed and created and manipulated to impose fear. You don't have to be afraid. That's why there's all those memes out there, of one form or another. But this video is running long, so I'm going to try and move on. You don't have to be afraid. A law-abiding gun owner will have a polite conversation with you. Respect begets respect. It's that simple. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what sex or gender you are. It doesn't matter who you go home to. It's a great equalizer. Conversation. Communication. Your ability to defend yourself without the need of anyone else. Because education regarding a topic that you may or may not know enough about and may or may not be afraid about, communication and education are the best things that you can do for your life. You don't necessarily have to get it out of a book. You don't have to get it out of a social media site. Shoot, you're here on YouTube listening to me rant for 24 minutes flat already. You can do it. You can have a good conversation. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you have a little bit of adventure. And if you have an opportunity to strike up a conversation regarding firearms with someone, if you for some reason are afraid or have concerns or want information or more information, there are thousands of resources out there and they're all at your disposal. But you won't have any access to any of them if you are afraid. So don't be afraid. Have that conversation Have that communication. Get information. Not just education, but information. Make that decision for yourself. Anyway, hope you have a great day. Have a great weekend. And